My dad threw me into a blizzard at 13, but my brother's text 13 years later let me end the family that destroyed me. Reddit stories. I went from being the household scapegoat to the man they couldn't control, and one panicked confession exposed everything they'd built their lives on. When the truth detonated, it didn't just break the family, it erased the version of me they thought would never fight back. Hi, I'm Alex, 26, and my life blew up the first time when I was 13 and my dad kicked me out into a January blizzard wearing nothing but basketball shorts and a t-shirt. The second time was 13 years later, when my golden boy brother sent me one desperate text that allowed me to burn the entire family tree to ash. I grew up in a house where I was basically the family chew toy. Dad's fists were quicker than his temper. Mom could turn herself into the victim of any situation like it was an Olympic sport, and my older siblings, Garrett and Kendra, treated me like a defective appliance they were waiting for Dad to throw out. Garrett was 4 years older, varsity baseball, honor roll, Dad's clone in spirit and ego. Kendra was 2 years older and specialized in crying on command. And me? I was the extra kid they didn't plan for and didn't want. A biological typo. Pop, my grandfather, was the only person who ever showed up for me. He'd visit once a month, see the bruises, hear the silence in my voice, and just quietly put a hand on my shoulder. Never pushed. Never asked. But he knew. The night everything really detonated happened over 3 missing baseball cards. Dad collected vintage ones. His shrine. His holy relics. He kept them locked in a cabinet, and only Garrett knew the combination because, of course, trust was a luxury reserved for the golden child. When Dad discovered 3 cards missing, Garrett didn't even blink before pointing at me. "It was him," he said, and Kendra nodded along like a bobblehead because siding with the family punching bag required courage she didn't have. Dad tore through my room, found nothing, then hit me until he was tired of hearing me swear I didn't touch anything. And when I said he shouldn't have had me if he hated me so much, something inside him snapped. He dragged me to the front door, opened it to the freezing dark, and said the line that made me feel both terrified and weirdly free. "You don't deserve to live." Then he shoved me outside and locked the door. Standing in the snow barefoot, my skin burning from cold, I realized 2 things. 1, nobody inside that house was coming for me, and 2, Pop was the only number I could call that wouldn't send me right back into hell. He picked up on the first ring. I didn't know then that Pop taking me in would become the start of a life built entirely on my own grit. And I didn't know that 13 years later, 13 years of silence, Garrett would text me one sentence that would let me finish what my father started the night he threw away the wrong son. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Pop didn't waste time. He showed up at that gas station in 20 minutes, took one look at my blue lips and shaking hands, and said nothing except, "Get in the truck, kiddo." That was his style, quiet action, no dramatics. The opposite of everyone I'd grown up with. That night, Pop did more parenting than my family had done in 13 years. Hot shower, warm clothes, soup I was too cold to taste. Then he called Dad. I couldn't hear the other end of the line, but I heard Pop's voice, calm but carved from granite. "You kicked a 13-year-old out in the snow," he said. "He's staying with me now. If you step foot on my property, I'll call the police and I'll tell them everything." He hung up, turned to me, and said, "You're home." And that was that. No debates, no guilt trips, no demands that I explain both sides. Just a man who recognized abuse and slammed the door on it. The next 2 years felt like learning to breathe again. Pop filed the paperwork, emergency custody, guardianship, the whole bureaucratic maze, and Mom signed whatever he shoved under her nose because she didn't want the cops poking around her spotless reputation. Dad didn't fight it. Not because he understood what he'd done, but because in his mind, I didn't exist anymore. Without fear breathing down my neck, I suddenly turned into the kind of student teachers bragged about in the break room. Straight as robotics club. A part-time job washing dishes where the owner said I was the kind of kid who makes adults look bad. Pop came to every school event, quietly proud, no spotlight needed. And for once, my life was boring in the best possible way. I worked like someone trying to outrun a childhood, which, in fairness, I was. By the time I was 18, I'd saved more money than my parents had combined. By 22, I had an engineering degree and zero debt. By 25, I bought my first house, a 3-bedroom fixer-upper with a yard big enough for Pop to plant tomatoes. Pop moved in 2 weeks later. I told him it was practical. He told me I was full of it. We settled into a life where dinner was peaceful, laughter was easy, and silence was comfortable. For the first time ever, I felt like a real human being instead of a walking target. But calm never lasts when the past still has your address. It was a Thursday when I pulled into my driveway and saw an unfamiliar beat-up sedan parked behind Pop's truck. My stomach tightened. I knew that car before I even saw the man leaning on my porch railing like he owned the place. My father. Older, grayer, but still wearing the same expression, like the world had wronged him by continuing to spin. "You did all right for yourself," he said. "Nice house." Pop was standing in the doorway behind him, jaw locked, eyes cold. "What do you want?" I asked. Dad smiled, the same smile he used right before something got broken. "I'm moving in." And just like that, 13 years of silence shattered. Dad didn't ask. He announced it, like I'd been keeping a guest room ready for the man who once threw me into a snowstorm and deadbolted the door behind me. "I lost my apartment," he said, stepping closer like proximity could rewrite history. "You've got the space. You're my son. It's your responsibility to take care of me." Pop let out a sound that started as a laugh and ended as something closer to a growl. I kept my face blank. "You're not moving in," I said. Dad waved a hand. "Don't be dramatic. You wouldn't even know how to be successful if I hadn't raised you right. Everything you have is because of my discipline." That word, discipline, landed like a slap. The same word he used before every beating. He took another step forward, puffing himself up, probably expecting me to shrink the way I had at 13. "The least you can do is give me a room." "I don't owe you anything," I said calmly. His eyes narrowed. "Watch your tone. I don't care how old you are. Get off my property." Something in his face twitched. A crack in the mask. But he doubled down. "You think you're tough now? You're still that scared little kid who lied about my cards and cost me thousands." And there it was, the obsession that had rotted his brain for over a decade. "You beat the wrong kid," I said. "Garrett stole those cards." Dad barked a laugh. "Still blaming your brother. Pathetic." Pop stepped forward then, just enough that Dad noticed. "Leave," Pop said, voice low. Dad scoffed. "Or what? He gonna hide behind you forever?" "No," I said. "I'll handle this." I pulled out my phone. "You have 10 seconds before I call the police." Dad's jaw tightened. "For what?" "Trespassing. Harassment. And if you want to go down memory lane, I can file retroactive assault charges." I nodded toward Pop. He kept records. Photos. Medical notes. Dates. Times. Dad froze. Not frightened, calculating. Like a man realizing the prey he'd expected had grown teeth. "You're making a mistake," he said. "No," I said. "I made a different life." He stared at me, waiting for the familiar flinch, the apology, the begging. I locked eyes with him instead. "If you ever come back here," I said, "I will make sure the world learns exactly who you are. And you will not survive that." For a moment I thought he might swing. Old habits. Old violence. But he didn't. He backed up. Got in his car. Slammed the door. Spat gravel as he peeled out of my driveway. Pop exhaled slowly. "You think that's the last we'll hear from him?" "No," I said. "But it will be the last time he tries that." We went inside. I made dinner. Pop read the paper. And for 2 weeks, nothing happened. Then my phone buzzed at 2:14 p.m. on a Tuesday. A number I hadn't seen in 13 years. Garrett, hey. We need to talk. It's about Dad, and about what happened back then. My stomach didn't drop. My heartbeat didn't stutter. But something colder settled in my chest. Because the moment I saw his name, I knew. This wasn't a reconciliation. This was an opportunity. Garrett didn't ease into it. He sent message after message like someone tapping the side of a glass to see if it would crack. I messed up back then. I want to apologize. Dad's spiraling. I can't deal with him alone. We're brothers, man. Help me out. Brothers. That word landed with all the sincerity of a coupon expiring in 30 seconds. I ignored him at first. Let him stew. People like Garrett only tell the truth when silence makes them sweat. Then he finally sent the one message that made me pause. Dad's losing it. I think he's going to do something crazy. And I thought, good. But I didn't type that. Instead, I played the card I'd been saving my entire life. I wrote back. Pop mentioned something. Said Dad's been telling people he thinks he was lied to back then, about the cards. A long pause. 3 dots. Disappearing. Reappearing. Garrett typing and deleting like a mouse deciding whether cheese is worth the trap. What do you mean? I went in deeper. Dad's ranting at anyone who'll listen. Saying he needs to find out what really happened. He keeps bringing up the cards. A full minute passed. Then 2. Then Garrett cracked. Okay, look. I need to tell you something. I didn't respond. Just waited. And then he confessed in a frantic paragraph that would become the most useful artifact of my adult life. I took the cards. I needed money for something. I sold 2. The mantle got damaged before I could sell it. I panicked. I blamed you because Dad was already pissed, and you know how he gets. I'm not saying it was right, but I was a kid and scared, and it was a mistake. A mistake. Sure. Like puncturing someone's tire and calling it a minor inconvenience. I screenshotted the message instantly. Saved it to the cloud. Emailed it to myself. Backed it up like it was the nuclear codes. Garrett kept typing. Dad made it all worse. He's been obsessed with this for years. Now he's melting down, and I need you to have my back. We can talk to him together. You've always been smarter at handling him. Please. Please. That was new. I typed back. Yeah. I'll help. Relief exploded from his end in a dozen messages. Thank you? Seriously. We can finally fix this. When do you want to talk to him? I didn't answer. Because I wasn't planning a reunion. I was planning a detonation. 2 hours later, Garrett's tone shifted. Hello? Why aren't you answering? Dude? Are you seriously ignoring me? You didn't tell him, did you? When I finally opened my phone again, I had a wall of texts. Some pleading. Some threatening. One straight-up meltdown. But the final one was shaking with rage honest. Do you have any idea what you just did to me? I did. And I slept better than I had in years. The explosion came faster than even I expected. The next evening, I got a text from an unknown number. Family meeting. 7 p.m. Your mother's house. Be there. This is not optional. Dad. Which was hilarious, because there is no force on earth weaker than a man who thinks he still has authority over adults he once terrorized as children. But I went. Not for him. For the show. When I walked into my mother's living room, the whole cast was already assembled, Mom perched on the couch like a nervous parakeet, Kendra pretending not to shake, and Garrett looking like he'd aged a decade in 12 hours. Dad stood in the center of the room with his laptop open like he was presenting quarterly earnings. Garrett spotted me and blanched. Why is he here? Dad didn't take his eyes off the screen. Sit down. I didn't. I leaned against the wall. Dad didn't push it. Not tonight. He clicked something on the laptop, spun it around so the entire room could see. Garrett's confession. Every word. Every timestamp. Every admission. Kendra gasped. Mom covered her mouth. Garrett's soul physically left his body. Dad looked at him with a calm that was so unnatural I actually felt goosebumps. Explain this, Dad said. Garrett swallowed. I told you. He faked that. He's trying to. Stop. The word hit the air like a hammer. Garrett froze. You showed me your phone, Dad said. You let me scroll. All the messages were there. You confessed. Garrett opened and closed his mouth like someone trying to manually reboot their brain. Dad stepped closer. You lied to me for 13 years. Silence thickened the room. Kendra looked from Dad to Garrett to me, as if she finally realized which side of history she was standing on. Garrett tried again. I was 17. I panicked. You were yelling. You let him. Dad pointed at me. Get beaten for it. You let me throw him out of the house. He could have died. I watched this impassively, like someone who walked into a movie halfway through and already knew the ending. Garrett tried to talk again. Dad slapped him. Hard. The sound echoed through the room like someone snapped a wooden plank in half. Mom gasped. Kendra covered her face. Garrett staggered back, hand pressed to his cheek in shock. Dad wasn't done. You lived in my house, he said, voice rising. Took my money. Ate my food. Drove the car I paid for. And all that time you let me believe he ruined my life. He turned slowly toward Kendra. And you. Kendra's breath hitched. You backed the lie. I didn't know. You knew he didn't break into that cabinet, Dad said. You just didn't want to be the one I was angry at that day. Kendra burst into tears. Mom tried to stand up. Please, let's just sit, Dad snapped. She sat. Then he looked at me. Really looked. For the first time since I was a kid. I'm sorry. The room went still. I'm sorry I didn't believe you, he said. I'm sorry for what I did. I threw out the wrong kid. I didn't move. Didn't nod. Didn't smile. Just let the words hang there until they grew awkward and heavy. Then I said, That's not something you get to fix with one sentence. Dad swallowed, nodded once, turned back to the other two. You're both out. Gone. No more money. No more help. No inheritance. You want a life? Build it yourselves. Garrett looked at me like I was supposed to step in and save him. But the thing about burning bridges is, some of us learn to swim. He and Kendra left, crying and begging in turns. Dad sat down heavily, the weight of 13 years finally settling onto his shoulders. I stood up. You can be sorry, I said. But you don't get access to my life. Then I walked out without looking back. Because apologies don't erase scars. And they sure as hell don't reopen doors. 2 days later, Garrett showed up on my doorstep looking like a raccoon who'd lost a fight with a lawnmower. Hair wild, eyes bloodshot, clothes wrinkled, duffel bag slung over one shoulder. I didn't even need to open the door fully to smell the desperation. He knocked again. Softer this time. The kind of knock someone uses when they're hoping pity will do what entitlement couldn't. I opened the door just an inch and kept the chain on. What? He exhaled in shaky relief. I need a place to stay. No. Alex, come on. I'm your brother. I almost laughed. Not out loud, just that internal kind of laugh where your soul rolls its eyes. You're the guy who framed me, watched Dad beat me, and stood there while he kicked me out into the snow. That's what you are. He ran a hand through his hair. I apologized. No, I said. You confessed. That's different. Garrett pressed his forehead to the doorframe like he was auditioning for most pathetic pose in a human drama. I have nowhere else to go. That's your situation, I said. Not my responsibility. I closed the door. Locked it. Walked away as he started pounding on the wood. You're heartless, he shouted. You're proving Dad right about you. Pop stepped into the hallway, drying his hands on a dish towel. He raised an eyebrow. Feel bad? No, I said. He nodded. Good. Garrett eventually gave up. His car engine coughed to life and faded down the street. Over the next week, my phone turned into a guilt missile launch site. Kendra texted, "We need to talk." Please. Mom texted, "Family should stick together." Garrett texted, "You ruined my life." Dad didn't text at all, which was honestly the most unnerving part. Then about a month later, Kendra tracked me down at my job, because nothing says emotional maturity like ambushing someone in a parking lot beside a stack of shopping carts. She was thinner, tired looking, makeup doing an Olympic-level job to hide the panic in her face. "I have a deal for you," she said. "I'm not buying anything," I replied. "Just listen." She swallowed. "Dad wants to talk to you. He's willing to help, financially. Down payment on a bigger house, a new car, whatever. If you just meet with him." I snorted. "You're trying to get back in the will." Her cheeks flushed. "That's not." "It is." I cut her off. "You're hoping he'll see you making peace and soften up." Her eyes watered, whether from shame or strategy, I couldn't tell. "We're family." She tried again. "No," I said. "We were a hierarchy. You and Garrett were safe because I wasn't. Now you're not safe anymore, and you're scrambling." I walked past her, pulled out my keys. Good luck with that. That night, I blocked her number. A week later, I got an envelope in the mail. No return address. Mom's handwriting. Inside was a family Thanksgiving photo with an empty chair where I used to sit. On the back she'd written, "We miss you. There's always a place for you here." I tossed it in the trash without a second thought. Pop looked up from his book when I walked back inside. "What was that?" "Mom trying again." He grunted. "Work?" "No." "Good." And that was that. No storms. No drama. Just a photo in the trash and a chapter that stayed shut. But the past never vanishes cleanly. It waits. And the real reckoning didn't start until months later, when karma finished the job I'd started. Karma didn't hit like lightning. It hit like a slow, methodical accountant, one who tallied every lie, every bruise, every night I spent wondering why I was born at all. And eventually, the bill came due. I learned most of it in pieces, the way you overhear gossip in a small town even after you've moved away. A coworker mentioned seeing my dad working part-time at a hardware store. Someone else said Garrett was crashing on a friend's couch. Kendra apparently lost her job after showing up late too many times and blaming family stress. Normally, I wouldn't have cared. They were living the consequences they'd earned. But what kept unfolding after that winter was poetic in a dark way. It started with Dad. He'd always been a big man, not just physically. He carried his anger like armor. But once Garrett's confession ripped the foundation out from under him, something in him cracked. Word around town was that he'd started drinking heavier, picking fights with coworkers, muttering to anyone who'd listen that everyone lied to him. The thing about tyrants is that once they lose their throne, they don't know how to live among mortals. Then came Garrett. He bounced between friends' apartments until they all got tired of supporting a grown man whose only skill was blaming someone else. He tried moving back in with Mom, but even she had limits once Dad cut her off financially. He took a job stocking shelves at a grocery store. Quit after 3 days. Said it was beneath him. At one point, he texted me from a new number. "I know you won't answer. Just wanted you to know you ruined my relationship too." She left when she heard what happened. She said she doesn't date liars. I blocked the number without responding. Then Kendra. Her version of meltdown was quieter. She'd always relied on being the favored daughter, the one who could cry her way into sympathy and attention. But after Dad exiled her, she became just another adult who actually had to earn things. She moved into a tiny studio, started waitressing, and apparently got written up more than once for snapping at customers. At one point she showed up at Pop's grocery store, Yes, Pop still insisted on doing errands even at his age, and tried to corner him. "Tell Alex he's being cruel," she begged. Pop had simply said, "Alex is finally being free." She didn't like that answer. The three of them tried circling each other again, like broken satellites looking for a signal. They attempted a family dinner, once. It ended with Dad storming out and Garrett throwing a plate. Karma wasn't done. The manufacturing plant Dad had worked at for years went through layoffs. His position, along with the last shred of stability he had, vanished. He filed unemployment. He blamed the government. Blamed the economy. Blamed my mom. Blamed me. Never blamed himself. Mom tried to keep him calm, but she'd spent so long enabling him that she didn't know what he was without the anger. Spoiler, he was worse. Eventually, the three of them stopped trying to reach me entirely. And that's when I realized the truth. They weren't avoiding me. They were afraid of me. The weak kid they once used as a shield had grown into a man whose silence held more power than their guilt. I never wanted revenge. But I wasn't opposed to receiving it when the universe served it piping hot. Still, none of that was the final blow. The final blow came when Dad reached out one last time, not to apologize, not to reconnect, but to make a demand so absurd it would have been funny if it didn't perfectly summarize the man he'd always been. Dad's last attempt to drag me back into his orbit arrived in the form of a letter shoved into my mailbox. Not a text. Not an email. A handwritten letter, because nothing says, "I'm losing my grip on reality," like reverting to 1953. The envelope was thin, the handwriting shaky. Pop found it before I did and held it like a piece of evidence. "Want me to burn it?" he asked. "Let's see what the old man thinks he's owed now." Inside was a single sheet of lined paper, ripped from a spiral notebook. Dad's handwriting slanted like he'd written it in a shaking truck. "Alex, we need to talk. Things are bad. I've been thinking and I realized I wouldn't be in this situation if you hadn't left when you did. I'm your father. You have duties. I need help with money and a place to stay while I look for a job. We can rebuild if you stop being stubborn. Call me Dad." I read it twice, then once more just to absorb how perfectly it distilled the essence of the man. He blamed me for being kicked out at 13. He claimed he was in financial ruin because I left. He said I had duties. And he wanted a place to stay, after trying to barge into my house not long ago like a cockroach announcing it would be subletting the kitchen. Pop watched my expression shift from disbelief to amusement to something colder. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "Better than okay. What are you going to do?" "Nothing. Because the opposite of love isn't hate. It's apathy." And Dad had finally earned my indifference. But the universe wasn't done sending messages. If Dad's letter was the spark, the real inferno started a week later when I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I let it ring out. It rang again. And again. On the fourth attempt, Pop frowned. "Answer it. I've got a feeling." So I did. A voice I hadn't heard in years spoke on the other end. "Alex? It's your mother." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 5 degrees. "We need your help," she said, voice trembling. Not demanding. Not guilt-tripping. Trembling. I didn't say anything. Let the silence chew at her. "It's your father," she said. He's not well." Pop leaned in, listening carefully. Mom inhaled sharply, the way someone does before ripping off a bandage. "He's been saying your name nonstop," she whispered. "Telling people you ruined his life, that you owe him, that you're planning something. He's paranoid. Drinking. Showing up at places looking for you. Her voice cracked. "He's not stable." I stared at the wall. "And?" I finally said. Mom hesitated, as if waiting for the version of me she remembered, the quiet kid desperate for any scrap of affection. "He needs help," she said. "We need help. Just talk to him. Please." There it was. The pivot. The subtle transfer of responsibility. The attempt to cast me as the solution to the man who broke me. No, I said. Her breath hitched. What do you mean, no? I mean I'm not doing this anymore, I said calmly. He made his choices. You made yours. And I made mine. I have nothing to do with whatever spiral he's in now. You can't just abandon your family. I didn't abandon anything, I said. I was thrown out. A beat of silence. Then her voice sharpened, revealing the woman I remembered too well. You're being cruel. No, I said. I'm being done. I hung up. Pop sat back slowly, nodding like he'd been waiting years to hear that exact sentence come out of my mouth. Proud of you, kiddo. The next week, Dad didn't call. Mom didn't call. Garrett and Kendra, radio silence. For the first time in my entire life, not a single person from that house had a hand on the wheel of my emotions. And for a brief, shining moment, I thought that was the end of it. But then something happened, something small at first, that told me the past wasn't finished. Not by a mile. It started with a knock on the door. Not frantic. Not angry. Just persistent. Too steady to be random, too patient to be a stranger. Pop and I were in the living room, him reading, me polishing a tool set, when he looked up over his glasses. You expecting anyone? No. The knock came again. I opened the door, expecting maybe a delivery, maybe a lost neighbor kid. Instead, it was a sheriff's deputy. Tall guy. Mid-40s. Polite, tired eyes. The kind of man who's seen every possible flavor of human mess and is no longer surprised by any of it. You Alex Turner? He asked. My stomach didn't drop. It didn't even twitch. I'd lived enough life to know fear has a very specific temperature, and whatever this was, it wasn't that. Yeah, I said. What's going on? He exhaled through his nose, like he was choosing his next sentence carefully. Your father's been making welfare reports about you. I blinked. Welfare reports? About me? Yeah, the deputy said, scratching the back of his head. Multiple claims that you're mentally unstable, a danger to yourself, and, his words, in crisis and need to be detained for your own good. Pop let out a sound so sharp the deputy actually glanced past me to check if we had a dog. I stared at the man. My father is trying to get me involuntarily committed? The deputy gave a look I could only interpret as, Buddy, I'm just delivering the package. Look, he said, lowering his voice. I've been doing this a long time, and something's off. Your father's reports are inconsistent. He keeps changing details. He gets angry when we don't respond the way he wants. My partner already flagged the last 2 calls as possibly malicious. Possibly? Pop muttered. The deputy continued. We're required to follow up, but from what I can see, you seem fine. You're coherent. Home's in order. No signs of crisis. So unless there's something you want to tell me, which I doubt, this is just a box I have to check. I stepped outside, closing the door behind me. My father's unstable, I said. He's been escalating. I'm assuming this is some attempt to force contact? That's the vibe I'm getting, the deputy said. He rambles about old loyalty and family betrayal. Honestly, it's messy. Messy. That was one word for it. Another was expected. When was the last report? I asked. About an hour ago, he said. Said he was afraid you were going to hurt someone. Didn't specify who or how or why. Of course he didn't. The deputy paused, studying my face. If he keeps this up, he said carefully, you might want to consider a restraining order. He's calling the station enough that it's becoming a pattern. A pattern. A legal word. A protective word. A warning. Thank you, I said. He nodded, handed me a card, and left. I went back inside. Pop had already put his book down, leaning forward on his elbows like a battleship preparing to fire. Well? He asked. He's escalating, I said. He's filing fake welfare checks. Pop's jaw clenched. Knew he would pull something, he said. Men like him only know two strategies: hit harder or scream louder when the world stops letting them hit. Deputy suggested a restraining order. Pop didn't blink. We're filing tomorrow. But the next escalation didn't wait until morning. It came that night. At 11:47 p.m., I got a text from an unknown number. You're not getting away with this. Then another. You think you can steal my kids from me? Turn them against me? You ruined everything. Then, you owe me your life. I made you. Then, I'm coming to talk. Don't make me break the door. Pop heard my phone vibrate 3 times in a row and walked into my room without knocking. Who is it? I turned the screen so he could read it. He didn't get angry. He got calm. Dangerously calm. Call the sheriff, he said. I already am. But while the deputy was on his way, Dad beat him to it. Headlights swept across the windows. An engine idled. A car door slammed. Pop stood beside me, arms crossed, the portrait of a man who'd been waiting decades for a reckoning. Dad stomped up the porch steps and started pounding on the door. Open up! Now! Pop whispered. Don't. I didn't. The pounding got louder. You think you can freeze me out of your life? After everything I sacrificed? You think you're better than me? A fist hit the door hard enough to rattle it in its frame. Lights turned on across the street. A neighbor's dog started barking. Then Dad shouted the one sentence that explained everything he was now and everything he had ever been. You owe me. You owe me forever. And that was when the sheriff's cruiser rolled up behind him, red and blue lights painting the whole street in confession. The deputy who stepped out of the cruiser wasn't the same one who'd come earlier. This one was younger, sharper-eyed, and clearly not in the mood for whatever late-night circus Dad thought he was hosting on my front porch. Sir, the deputy called out as he approached. Step away from the door. Dad didn't even turn around. He's my son, he bellowed. I have a right to talk to him. Pop murmured under his breath. If he starts listing his rights, he's out of ammo. Dad pounded the door again. Open this door before I. Sir, the deputy barked. Hands where I can see them. Now. Dad finally spun around, breathing hard, face red and twisted with the kind of rage that isn't actually rage anymore, just an empty habit. He pointed at our house like a prophet of nonsense. He's unstable. He needs to be taken in. He attacked our family. The deputy cut him off. We've already received your reports. We've also already determined they were unfounded. Dad blinked. What? And, the deputy continued, we've also documented your repeated false filings. That's a crime. Watching Dad's face shift from outrage to confusion to a fear he would never admit tasted sweeter than revenge ever could. False? False? I'm his father, he sputtered. I know when something's wrong. Pop opened the door just a crack, just enough to be seen, not enough to let Dad inside. Evening, officer, Pop said calmly. My grandson and I are fine. We have video of the last 10 minutes if you need it. Dad whipped around. You're poisoning him against me. Pop's eyebrows rose. No. You did that work yourself. The deputy took a step forward. Sir, you need to leave the property. Now. Dad jabbed a finger toward the door. He owes me. He owes everything he has to me. I made him. I opened the door fully then, not to let him in, but to let him see my face, and more importantly, let the deputy see that I was calm and composed. You didn't make me, I said. You left me to freeze to death. Anything I built afterward came despite you. That did it. Dad lunged forward like he was going to shove past me. He didn't get far. The deputy grabbed his arm, twisted, and pinned him against the porch railing so fast Dad didn't even get a chance to yell before he was already cuffed. Hey! Hey! I didn't do anything! You are under arrest for disorderly conduct and harassment. the deputy said sharply. Continuing to approach this residence after warnings. Continuing to file false reports. And threatening a resident. Dad thrashed. This is my son. My property. Pop snorted. The house isn't yours, the son isn't yours, and the consequences are. The deputy pulled Dad toward the cruiser. Dad kept ranting, kicking, trying to twist around to look at me. This isn't over, Alex. You hear me? You can't cut out your own blood. I made you. I made you. I didn't follow him. Didn't shout back. Just watched him get placed in the back seat of a car driven by someone who had absolutely no interest in his mythology. The door slammed. Silence. The cruiser drove off. Pop let out a long, slow breath. You okay, kiddo? Yeah, I said. Actually, yeah? Inside, Pop made tea like it was any other night, because that's who he was, steadiness in human form. But as I sat at the kitchen table, letting the steam rise toward my face, something in me settled in a way it never had before. For years, I thought the only justice I'd ever get would be the life I'd built far away from them. But seeing Dad taken away, not because I fought him, not because I screamed, but because he finally collided with the consequences of his own gravity. It wasn't victory. It wasn't revenge. It was closure. And closure is quieter than I ever expected. But the story wasn't finished. Because consequences don't fall on tyrants alone. They fall on the kingdom they corrupted. 3 days after Dad's arrest, my phone buzzed again. Not from him. From Kendra. And the message she sent was only 5 words long. You need to see Mom. I stared at Kendra's message, you need to see Mom, and felt absolutely nothing. No dread, no worry, no instinctive pull. Just a quiet question, why now? Pop watched me read it, his expression steady. You don't owe them a damn thing, he said. But you also don't run from what you're not afraid of. So I went. Mom's house looked smaller than I remembered, like someone had taken a vacuum to the walls and sucked the life out. Inside, she was sitting at the kitchen table, the same one where I'd once done homework, while she sighed dramatically about how stressful I made her life. Now she looked deflated. Not old. Just emptied out. She didn't look up right away. When she finally did, her eyes were red but dry, like she'd run out of tears. Your father's gone, she said. I blinked. Gone how? Skipped town after they released him. Left a note saying he was starting over somewhere people still respect fathers. She attempted a laugh that died halfway out. Didn't say where. I waited. She wasn't done. I don't know if he's coming back. She continued softly. And the truth is, I'm relieved. That was the first honest sentence she'd ever said to me. She folded her hands like someone preparing for confession. Alex, I was wrong. For years. I let things happen because it was easier to look away. I told myself I was keeping the peace, but really, I was keeping myself comfortable. She swallowed hard. You didn't deserve any of it. And I'm sorry. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't manipulative. It wasn't even a plea for forgiveness. It was just small, tired truth. I nodded once. Thank you for saying that. She wiped her eyes. I don't expect anything from you. I just needed you to know. She didn't ask me to stay. Didn't ask me to come back. Just sat there, finally seeing me as something other than a burden or a mirror for her guilt. I stood, pulled in a slow breath, and said, I hope you build something better for yourself now. She nodded. And that was the end of it. I walked out of that house lighter than I'd walked in. Not because she'd earned forgiveness, she hadn't. But because her apology wasn't a chain. It was a door I didn't need anymore. When I got home, Pop was on the porch, sipping tea like a man who'd already read the last chapter. You good? He asked. Yeah, I said. I'm good. And this time, I wasn't saying it to convince myself.